Strike night over Iran. 129 American aircraft cross into Iranian airspace. Bombers, fighters, tankers, a whole armada moving toward the country's most protected sites. And Iran's air force does something remarkable. Nothing. Not one Iranian fighter climbs to meet them. The Russian-built air defense batteries Tehran spent years and billions acquiring don't successfully engage a single target. The most heavily defended country in the region opens like an unlocked door. 1,000 miles to the north, the advanced Su-35 fighter jets Iran had ordered and paid deposits on sat on a Russian factory floor, being built on schedule for someone else's war. And in Beijing, the government that buys most of Iran's oil said all the right things about restraint and did nothing. This was the night Iran found out exactly what its powerful friends were worth. Because for a decade, Iran told the world, and told its own people, that it was the eastern anchor of a new bloc, strong enough to break America's grip on the Middle East. Then, America struck, and the bloc watched. This is the story of the alliance that wasn't, how Iran traded its oil, its drones, and its strategic loyalty to Moscow and Beijing, and discovered under fire that it had bought customers, not cavalry. Before we get into it, the fighter jets that never came, the drone deal that got Iran cut out of its own weapon, the single sentence missing from every treaty Iran signed, and why, in the end, this may be less a betrayal than a story Iran had been telling itself for years. The pivot that looked like an alliance. To understand how alone Iran really was, you have to understand how unalone it thought it was. For years, Iran built its escape from Western pressure by turning east, and it did so deliberately. It signed a 20-year comprehensive strategic partnership with Russia in early 2025. It deepened a 25-year cooperation program with China. It took its seat at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, then joined the BRICS group of emerging powers. Each step was announced at home as a milestone, proof that the Islamic Republic was no longer isolated, that it had finally found great power backers to stand behind it. Iranian strategists even gave it a name: strategic depth. The idea that Tehran no longer stood alone against Washington, but leaned on a continent-spanning coalition of the sanctioned and the defiant. Every summit photo, every handshake with Xi or Putin, was treated as evidence of the doctrine. Iran wasn't a pariah, the story went. It was a founding member of the world that comes after American dominance. The logic seemed sound. Iran was feeding China a river of discounted oil, and feeding Russia's war machine a river of attack drones. Surely that bought something. Surely, when the moment came, the two most powerful challengers to the United States would not let their eastern partner be dismembered. That was the theory Iran built its security on. On strike night, the theory met reality, and reality won in about the time it takes 129 aircraft to cross a border. The missing sentence. Here's the detail nobody put on the state television banners. If you actually read those partnership treaties, one thing is conspicuously absent from every single one of them. As one analysis put it, they stop short of any mutual defense clause. No mutual defense clause. Not with Russia, not with China. The documents promise trade, intelligence sharing, joint exercises, military technical cooperation. Everything except the one thing that actually matters when the bombs are falling: an obligation to show up. This is the difference between a partnership and an alliance, and it's not a technicality. NATO's members are bound by Article 5. An attack on one is treated as an attack on all. That single sentence is the reason nobody bombs a NATO capital. Iran's treaties contained no such sentence, which meant that when the missiles came, Moscow and Beijing owed Tehran precisely nothing, and paid exactly that. And it goes deeper than a missing paragraph. Iran's deal with China sits a full tier below the all-weather alliance Beijing gives Pakistan. Russia never even ranked Iran among its top-tier partners, placing it below Belarus, below India, below Algeria. Think of it like renting an apartment and believing you own the building. Iran signed leases and called them a fortress. The landlords never promised to defend the place. The jets that never came. Nowhere is that gap clearer than in the sky, or rather, the empty sky. Iran had ordered roughly 48 Su-35 fighter jets from Russia, the most advanced aircraft Moscow exports, and reportedly put money down. For years, Iranian officials promised the fleet was weeks away, then months away, then coming any day now. Leaked Russian export files even carried Iran's order under a customer code, listing 48 jets for delivery stretched across 2026 to 2028, with only the first 16 reportedly under construction. It would have been the first fighter jet Iran imported in roughly 35 years. But a delivery schedule that runs to 2028 is cold comfort when the bombs arrive in 2026. What actually landed on Iranian runways were trainer jets. One of Iran's own reformist newspapers, Shahed, said the quiet part out loud. Except for some trainer jets, None of the promised equipment had been delivered. Why the endless delay? Because Russia was busy losing its own aircraft over Ukraine and keeping every Su-35 it could build for that fight. A senior member of Iran's own Expediency Council noted the humiliation bluntly. Russia had sold its top air defense system to Turkey, a NATO member, but still wouldn't hand it to Tehran. So when those 129 American jets came, Iran met them with a wish list instead of a weapon. Not one interceptor rose. The air defenses stayed silent. The fleet that was supposed to guard Iranian skies was a set of invoices in a filing cabinet and a promise Moscow never intended to keep on time. A fighter jet on order is not a fighter jet in the air. Iran had confused the two and paid for the confusion in open sky. The discount and the shrug. If Russia was the unreliable arms dealer, China was the cool-eyed customer who took everything and gave back almost nothing. In 2025 alone, China purchased over 80% of Iran's oil exports, and at fire sale prices, discounted to as low as $14 a barrel. By some estimates, that saved Beijing around $7 billion a year. Iran was effectively subsidizing the Chinese economy, and it believed that generosity would be repaid in hardware, modern fighters, real air defense, the kind of top-tier kit China ships to Pakistan. It never came. Beijing sent dual-use parts and components, useful enough to keep Iran in the fight, but flatly refused the game changers. No modern fighter jet, no strategic long-range air defense system. Requests for its best hardware never even reached the contract stage. The longer-range air defense systems and advanced anti-ship missiles Iran wanted would have required a wholesale shift in Chinese policy. And Beijing has a decades-old habit of not arming countries under sanctions or in direct confrontation with the United States. Iran was both. Worse still, China was at the same time courting Iran's wealthy rivals across the Gulf, quietly hedging its bets on the very neighbors Tehran feared most. The reason is coldly rational. China was, at that very moment, trying to stabilize a trade truce with Washington. As one Chinese analyst put it, that was more important than rebuilding the Iranian Air Force. Protecting the relationship with America mattered more than protecting Iran. Tehran was a discount, not a dependent. The drone bargain that robbed Iran. And then there's the detail that turns this from a bad deal into a genuinely bitter one. Iran's one world-class military product is the Shahed, the cheap, long-range attack drone that has terrorized Ukrainian cities for years. It was Iran's crown jewel, the weapon that made Tehran genuinely useful to Moscow. Iran had given Russia real material help in its Ukraine war, diplomatic cover, ammunition, and thousands of those very drones, on the unspoken assumption that Moscow would return the favor in Tehran's own hour of need. So Iran shared the technology and helped Russia stand up a Shahed production line deep inside Russia, in Tatarstan. Watch what happened next. Russia learned the design, localized the whole operation, and quietly cut Iran out of it. The newest drones pulled from the wreckage in Ukraine now run on Chinese engines, not Iranian ones. Iran taught its partner to build its best weapon, and the partner kept the factory and swapped out the Iranian parts. There's an old lesson about giving away the recipe instead of selling the meal. Iran handed over the recipe and woke up to find its two great friends cooking with it, one running the kitchen, the other supplying the engines, and Iran left off the menu entirely. That's not an alliance. That's being strip-mined by people you called partners. Why they were never coming. Now, in fairness, step into Moscow's and Beijing's shoes, because their choice wasn't personal. It was cold arithmetic. As one report put it, the war exposed the hard limits of Iran's strategic partnerships. Putin was never going to trade blows with the United States over Iran. He had no treaty obligation to, he would lose any direct fight, and siding openly with Tehran would wreck the careful relationships he keeps with Israel and the wealthy Gulf states. His response to the death of Iran's supreme leader was condolences and a call for diplomacy. Words, not warplanes. He stayed pointedly neutral when a record number of countries lined up to condemn Iran at the United Nations. Neither Russia nor China spent a veto to shield it, a silence Washington gleefully read as proof of Iran's isolation. Russia's own strategic doctrine barely mentions Iran, filing it near the bottom of Moscow's list of priorities. China's calculation was just as detached. Beijing treats East Asia and Taiwan as its real theater. The Middle East is an energy shopping trip, not a place it will fight for. China avoids formal military alliances almost entirely. Its only real mutual defense treaty is with North Korea, and it dates to 1961. Iran was never in that category and never would be. Neither power abandoned an ally because neither had ever agreed to be one. The abandonment was real. The alliance was the fiction. White customers, not cavalry. So how should we actually judge this? Honestly. Which means giving the other side its due. Some analysts argue that reading the lack of direct Russian or Chinese military intervention as abandonment misses the point. That Russia and China quietly shifted into being Iran's technological anchors, feeding it navigation, satellite intelligence, and dual-use components behind the scenes, and that both have real, lasting stakes in Iran's survival: the oil, the trade corridors that route around Western control. In that view, the help was real. It was just invisible. Maybe. But invisible help doesn't intercept a bomber, and satellite data doesn't scramble a fighter. The verdict Iran cannot escape is simpler and sharper than betrayal. It was never promised rescue, and it didn't get one. It mistook a checkout counter for a command bunker. For a decade, it told itself it had joined a brotherhood of great powers rising against the West. And the first time it needed that brotherhood to be more than a slogan, it discovered it had been a supplier all along, and a supplier is only valued as long as it supplies. The oil kept flowing to China even as Iranian sites burned. The drone technology kept working for Russia even as Iranian pilots stayed on the ground. The relationship never actually broke, because it was functioning exactly as designed, just not for Iran. Closing question. If the great power bloc Iran spent a decade building couldn't, or wouldn't, put a single fighter in the air when the bombs fell, then what is that partnership really worth now? Is Iran a rising member of a new multipolar order, or just the cheap oil and free drone technology that order runs on, right up until the day defending it becomes inconvenient? Our update continues. Stay tuned.